This is your time, Jason, to bitch and complain as much as you can, all right?
In the simplest form, it's a way to support men to grow into better men.
Now I'm touching on my relationship with my father. I love you, Dad.
This is Jason, and this is Chasing Dragons.
Jason, welcome to the show, man. How's it going?
It's going really well.
Guys, this is Jason. He's a fatherhood coach and a licensed psychologist who spent 30 years helping boys, men, and families navigate identity, parenting, and emotional growth. His program, Journeyman, blends group coaching, narrative therapy, and community-based support to help dads show up with more presence, purpose, and power. The work is powerful and retention is nearly perfect, but the business is stuck at $1,000 to $2,000 a month with unclear messaging, no lead gen engine, and no scalable path to growth. Today, we're going to start by exploring what's working inside of Jason's business. Then we're going to dig into the specific challenges holding him back. And finally, I'm going to share my take on how he could scale Journeyman to a sustainable revenue generating system without losing the heart of what makes it great. Sound good?
Perfect.
I love it. Cool. So Jason, tell me about Journeyman. Tell me from like a high level, like how it makes money and what the goals are of the program.
Sure. Currently, the primary income source is what I call the Journeyman Mug Club, which is a membership program for fathers. And we meet, multiple times throughout the month. And I ask each guy to make to themselves a 6-month commitment. Most of them, if not all of them, have been with me since day one. That's the primary income base right now. Another way that I do earn income through Journeyman is I do some individual coaching. I do some speaking, workshopping, and I've done a few consultations in the past, but I'd like to do more of that in the future.
Got it. Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Now, at a high level, just so that viewers understand, I've studied your business a little bit, and we've talked as well. But can you explain what Journeyman is and why you started it?
Absolutely. In the simplest form, it's a way to support men to grow into better men. And by doing that, we connect more powerfully with one another, with ourselves, and then with our families, both at home and, even in the community and at work. Guys who are connected are stronger, more emotionally aware, more powerfully, they create things basically. And so to really support fathers and men, I've been working as a therapist for almost 30 years now, and realized that while of course therapy is really useful for a lot of individuals, the big picture, like you said, looking from the big picture for what's going on with men and boys today is one of isolation, connection. And so again, being in a therapy room behind a closed door individually, no matter how powerful our sessions are, they're leaving the room and walking into a community, a culture that isn't supporting that growth. So Journeyman I built Journeyman as a way of connecting and creating community so that men are able to support one another and really gather together to change and shift the narrative about what manhood and fatherhood truly looks like.
I think that's awesome. I think that's fantastic. And I really like this idea that even though you've done your therapy practice in one-on-one sessions, like Journeyman is a way to kind of break out of that one-on-one session and have a larger impact. I think that's really cool. Beautiful. Cool. What is in a year from today, your business, let's say you do everything perfectly and everything goes according to plan. What does your business look like a year from today?
Wow. Well, I think the business looks to the point where I have a full or near full mug club and perhaps even a waiting list. I am also doing some training of other coaches or interested individuals in the Journeyman curriculum, both so that they can, strengthen their own practices, but also that way I can perhaps hire some other coaches to run some of the small groups in the Mug Club, which then frees me up to do some of the other work that I want to do. So within that year, that being said, I'm also right now working on a series. I've started working actually just this week when we started talking, but a series of small booklets. I don't know if we call them ebooks these days or whatnot, but basically 20, 35-page booklets that are very practical, tactical, and informative around men's issues, fatherhood work, things like that. And so I'd love to have a library of that developed by, or at least started by the end of the year.
Guys, if you want to see more conversations with more real entrepreneurs figuring stuff out in real time, go ahead and hit that like button. Also subscribe to the channel because we're trying to hit 2,500 subs by the end of the summer. So hit the subscribe button. I think that's really awesome and very very doable. Your Mug Club waiting list, how many people are currently in Mug Club, and what is the capacity for that?
As it stands now, and so this would not include, again, hiring some people to do other groups, because then obviously we could scale. But as of right now, there are about 10 guys in the program, and I would like within a year to get to 60.
Got it. Beautiful. And each of those 10 guys are paying monthly, like around 110, you said 110 to 150, I saw on the website?
I would say, well, because this was the initial launch, there was sort of a lower price. I would say on average it was about 100, because I would say most of the guys started out as sort of founders, and then I've had a couple people, who joined afterwards and are paying a little more.
Cool. Got it. All right. Sounds good. Okay. So now this is the part where we talk about, or actually before we get into problems, you mentioned that most of your clients right now are coming from referrals, right? From other therapists and things. Is that correct?
Yeah, other therapists, mom coaches, things like that. I have a few guys over the past who have come through word of mouth thing, and actually one or two guys actually came from within. One, someone, has told their friend, "You got to join. This would be great."
Cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I bet that feels really good. Yeah, when they start bringing their friends. Cool.
Oh, yes. And actually, the guy who brought two of his friends is someone who, in my mind, I've actually been using as sort of an ideal client,
Cool.
avatar kind of thing. And so it was perfect that me thinking that way, and then he brings in two guys. It was great.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So you got it. You've been like using like an avatar to do marketing and make business decisions. I think that's great. Cool. And when your clients come in, that avatar client, what do you think he is getting from the group? Like, what is he resonating with the most from the group?
It's funny. I have a lot of training in group work, and I believe in it wholeheartedly. And I, in the beginning of Journeyman, kind of forgot that. And so, I often pushed, this wonderful curriculum that I've developed and these strategies and all of these things. And almost without fail, when I talk to the guys in the group, they talk about the power of being in a group. So I think probably the answer that a lot of them would say would be, I get to be in this space where other men are nodding, other men are sharing their own support and accountability and understanding what's going on. These are guys who, may have other close friends outside, but they've almost all said they don't have a chance to speak in this way with other men often enough. And so one is the sort of community and accountability and the connections that are made in the group. The next thing, and I think this is really important to include as well, is that many of the guys have really shared that their presence, their ability to sort of be present at home and be self-aware and really look at the kind of man that they are and how they're showing up with the people they love the most, that has made a significant improvement.
Got it. That's wonderful. That's fantastic. I think that genuinely is awesome. So they appreciate the community, the accountability, the connection to the group, and it changes their presence and their self-awareness, how they're showing up more intentionally with their families and everything, and in their relationships with their children. I think that's fantastic. Cool. Okay, now this next part of the show is diving into your problems, right? You get to complain, right? And try to complain as much as possible, right? Because if we're going to try to solve some problems on this call, we got to understand what they are, right? So this is your time, Jason, to bitch and complain as much as you can. All right.
I'll try. That's not my typical way of being it, so I will for sure.
Okay.
Yes. Lead me on.
Okay. Sounds good. Yeah. What is the biggest problem in your business right now?
Getting clients, having people raise their hand to do this. I have often tried to make light of it, saying that I'm a bit of a sadist because I chose a niche and a population that are notoriously not going to raise their hand for this kind of work. But a lot of my personal perspective and worldview is challenging taken for granted dominant stories. And so that story of men don't want help and don't want to learn to do better, and I challenge that. And I really, every guy who gets in is fully in. And so there's some disconnect between this old story that I'm challenging and the reality that, I haven't figured out the formula, or, I haven't. And, I think part of it has been on me, right? I've not been as consistent with sort of posting or whatnot. I think this will add to the complaining that I don't like to say much, but my time and resources are incredibly limited. I have a family, I have a full-time job on top of Journeyman that I very much am looking to decrease significantly. And yet we have to keep the lights on in the house and have the mortgage paid. And, I have two teenage boys. And so, the idea of building this, 5 o'clock in the morning, midnight when everyone's at bed or in between sessions means that my bandwidth is more limited than I'd like it to be, which for me is really challenging because if I'm not able to visualize that there's going to be an ROI on an action I take, it's harder for me to get into that action, even though intellectually I know it is. I know it's important. And so yeah, I think the biggest challenge is finding ways to get guys to raise their hands for this. Yeah, no, I think that's the main one. And of course it encompasses a much bigger, issues and problems.
Got it. So yeah, so your biggest problem, you describe it as having people raise their hand to join the group and to get involved. You mentioned this that like the market is specifically resistant to this idea of improving these things. And that seems to be the predominant cultural story around this. And then also, you mentioned time constraints because you've got a family at home and a full-time job. Cool. Would you say that is pretty much everything? You also mentioned some speaking stuff. Are you struggling to get speaking gigs or anything like that?
Yeah. So, but just before I speak to the speaking, I want to just add, and as you said it helped me clarify. Yes, it's getting people to raise their hands, but I think if I were to sort of raise the helicopter and look at a little bigger picture, that is an issue, but I think more so or predating that would be the awareness, right? Like I'd love to have more guys tell me they're not going to raise their hands because that means I'm connecting with more guys.
Exactly.
So I think there is the awareness and getting the word out and the messaging that's even before whether or not people are going to raise their hands for it. So I think that's the main issue. And then to speak to the speaking, yes, it's been a challenge to do that, but in full transparency, I have not made like intentional effort to make that happen because I don't think I know the path to do that. And so for me, I happen to in all things, I happen to really enjoy templates so that I can play with a template and then put my own creative, artistic slant on it. If I don't have a template, I kind of wander around lost for a little bit, kind of stumbling along the path, looking for a path. So I don't really have a path for finding more speaking and workshopping gigs. And I also am not fully clear on the path of increasing awareness.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Beautiful. All right. So having more people raise their hands, awareness issues, but also the messaging and getting the word out, speaking gigs. You want to do more speaking, but you don't really have a path or a template for making that happen. And then your time and resources are significantly limited because you have a full-time job and a family at home. I think that is all of the problems that we talked about too in intake and in your intake exercise. So yeah, cool. Are you ready to move kind of into the solution-oriented part of the call?
Absolutely.
Here we go.
Absolutely.
Cool. So just so that a few things at the top here before I say anything, because you are a therapist and I know that you're probably very familiar with how people work, right? And so as soon as somebody starts giving advice or anything and being like, this is for sure the way to do this, like people start shutting down, right? So I think it's important to say a few things at the top here. Number one, this is my perspective, right? This is one person's perspective. My background is specifically like digital marketing. I have a degree from the Rochester Institute of Technology, and but most of my experience is with like social media stuff and marketing stuff. So that's kind of where my lens is coming from. The next thing too is that like, what is my horse in the race? Well, this show is called Chasing Dragons, where I'm trying to help entrepreneurs, right? And so my horse in this race is ideally you would leave this call, you would take some of my ideas, you would experiment with them, and then in 3 to 6 months from now, you would reach back out to me and give me some feedback and be like, Noah, this worked, this sucked, right? And hopefully, like the idea here is like the evidence that I will know more of what I am talking about based on like real results that clients get. And two, hopefully my ideas will help you. So that is kind of like what the premise of the show is here before any of these things. That is why I'm giving you this advice. It comes from a place of like, I want your business, our incentives are aligned and I want your business to succeed. Okay.
Love it.
That said, it is a little bit of tough love sometimes, okay? Because I think I dug into your website and I do have some thoughts here. So cool. Right now, I want to hear your thoughts about your brand. So when you think of the Journeyman brand and you think of your website and you think of your messaging, from your perspective, Jason, what do you like about your branding and what do you think could be improved?
I'll say really quickly that what I really like about the branding is, I think, still more than out there in the world in my head. I haven't been able, so I think the branding and the idea is solid. I think so. The improved part is I don't know if it's hit the screens and the world well enough. So that being said, what I do about what's out there, what I really like is I like the overall branding story. I like the sort of, even though I have not been able to develop it enough, I love the visuals of sort of down to earth. I've got this sort of archetypal, mythopoetic kind of almost fantasy like vision, the overarching kind of metaphor is I get to be the virtual innkeeper of an inn where men are invited in to be real with one another. And that has been really resonant with many of the guys. And it's something that I really love playing in for a lot of reasons. And so I think I think rather than talking too much, I would say is I really like the concept of the brand. I have not enjoyed or been able to really execute it as much as I'd like.
Got it. Got it. So you think it's solid. You don't think it's hit the screens well enough. You like the overall brand story. You haven't had a chance to develop it enough. It's down to earth. It's archetypal. You kind of position yourself as the innkeeper, inviting them into this inn in this program. This part, I know there's going to be resistance here, but I think it's important for me to just share my honest thoughts. So I think that one of your biggest problems here is a branding issue. I think it is a communication issue. It took me quite a long time to understand exactly what your brand was about and how your business worked. So I went to your website. I think actually, let's just even look at your website here. Or actually, that's going to distract us. I liked your website because I liked the call to action at the top, right? You're a father who gives a shit. That is the first big bold letters on your website. I thought that was really strategic, really good, right? Because you're speaking directly to the person. After that, it got a lot more confusing to me. Are the mug club to me reminds me of Steven Crowder, right? This is all my personal perspective too, by the way. And I have things to say that bring it out of the realm of my personal perspective, because the things that I'm going to suggest they move away from personal perspective and they instead move to validate this with testing in the market. And I'm going to share some ideas about how you can do that. Here's the problem in your marketing from my perspective. I don't think you speak enough to the problems that your target audience actually is having. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
I think that a lot of your messaging is around this lofty ideal. You jump straight into frameworks, right? You have these 3 frameworks here: deep, men's, and work. Deep and men's are both acronyms that you use. You're offering solutions, but I think one thing that your website could do more of is talk to the problems. So I have a question for you. Is that something that you've done intentionally here? Is there intentional reasons why you haven't spoken to the problems that some of your newer clients might be experiencing when they consider joining the group?
Yes and no. I think when I put this up, just a little bit of a broader context. Right when you initially contacted me, I'm in the midst of rewriting the website. And I tried to rush to get it done before we talked, so that way you'd have that. The newer versions do actually focus more on problem-oriented kind of language. So I'll say is what you're saying is incredibly resonant and important. It was done intentionally in the beginning because I didn't know what I was doing. Gotcha. And I was very proud of what I had created, and so thought other people would like that. And I have since, that was put up, several years ago. And so, I have learned quite a bit about this since then. And so it was done intentionally, but naively that way.
No, you're good. Yeah. I'm not trying to, you don't have to beat yourself up.
No, it's true. It's just accurate. Sure. That's all.
But, you've got 10 subscribers. You said your fall off rate is very low. You have huge wins in this business. And so my thought is just if you fix this intake, if you fix your positioning, your branding, and then you create an engine that gets these people in the door consistently, you're going to be in a really good position from my perspective. But so I guess if we were to talk more about those problems, so this other thing that you mentioned on our intake calls and stuff was that you're talking about how, men typically don't like to work on these things. This is like the cultural story of these things. I'm not saying that that's not true, but one thing I am thinking is that if that is the mental framework that you are operating with as you approach marketing, as you approach sales, I think that that is going to be a belief that holds you back, right? It's like a low resolution understanding of like what the actual problems are. If we kind of dismiss like, well, most men do not want to work on this stuff. I guess my question around that is, what evidence do you have that supports the idea that most men don't want to like become better fathers and be more engaged?
Well, let me just change the, languaging on that. Is it's not that I don't think they want to. I think that there's a cultural barrier to asking for help.
Got it.
That's why I think that's why I think the guys who are in stay in. I do believe men want to do and be better for the most part. I mean, some guys don't think they need to or whatever, but for the most part, men want to do and be better. So I just want to correct that piece. I think there is a cultural barrier to asking for help. And there is an isolation in that, in terms of evidence, right? Like I talk to many women or wives who are like, oh, I wish my husband would do that, but he just won't do it. Or, I would say a significant percentage of guys will get in touch with me over the years and have said, I'd love to do an individual. I don't want to do this group. And
Gotcha.
so the idea of sitting in a group is a little bit overwhelming, a little bit scary. And again, once they get in, as I mentioned, without fail, they're always saying the group part is one of the most impactful, effective things. And so, but I agree with you completely. If there's a guiding belief or story that men just don't want to do this, that will certainly impact my sales calls or even just like subtly the things that I'm writing. So I do agree with that. That's something that in some ways, it's something I've been challenging and in my own worldview and trying to work on.
I really love the higher resolution like articulation that you just had, which is like they're afraid of asking of like reaching out and asking me for the help, right? Which is why I think if you had some paid ads running for this and you had a pipeline and you had a system for paid ads where you made asking for help like super easy and all they had to do was click a single button and then like there was a very, very, very smooth path to walk them from not knowing who you are at all the way to, being a paying member to be in this group. I think that is ultimately what you're trying to achieve. And so the rest of my suggestions here are around that. That said, I do want to speak to this idea of when we talk about solving problems for people in business, I talk about two types of problems, right? There's the good for me problem, there's the vitamin problem. And then there's the bullet problem, right? Where there's a bullet in my leg and like, I know I should people need to take their vitamins and they know they're good for me, but when there's a bullet in your leg and you're going to die if you don't do it, right? Then you need someone to fix that problem. And so
Yes.
from my experience and from everything I know about copywriting, the more we can solve problems, the more we can solve bullet problems of I am shot in the leg and this person's going to fix it because they are a war medic. People buy things emotionally, right? And so you need to kind of like stoke the flame of like you have these real problems. And by the way, I don't think that that's unethical. I do not think it's unethical to speak to someone's real problems that they are really experiencing to kind of get them into that emotional state where they take action to change their lives and improve their lives. So, as we think about building this pipeline from somebody who's never heard of you all the way to paying subscriber, what are those problems, Jason, that you would feel the most comfortable talking about that new fathers or, fathers who are struggling have?
I think, certainly feeling present and participative, that's not the right word, but it's participatory and as a full partner at home. I think that's really that's the first thing that comes to mind is, I don't remember the exact statistic, but I will share like there's some super high percentage of men and fathers who are spending more time at home,
Cool.
right? So we've come a long way. Guys are more engaged. They're more, interested and interested and engaged at home. But let's just say for argument's sake, because it's really high, let's say it's 300% more than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. We also have not increased the sociocultural stories, training, and socialization of men to do that better. which means that we may be home 300% of the more time, but that gives us 300% more opportunities to make mistakes. So our emotional awareness, our presence, our ability to take part in the daily mundane life of being at home. So guys who are tired and busy and challenged and at work and stressed, then they come home. And I've heard from so many guys that even if they are willing participants, they feel a little lost at home. And so separating from work life, from home life, and being present to their kids of all ages, being connected with their partners, and in everything outside of the bedroom, right? Like
Yeah.
all of the other things that are going on in the house. I wrote an article on my blog years ago called "The Man on the Can," where it's basically the father who's hiding in the bathroom because, there's chaos outside.
Yeah.
And we understand how to deal with chaos at work most of the time.
Sure.
And, I had one of my clients said, and this is one of my favorite sort of quotes, he said, I think I'm a really good father, except for when I get in my own way and my wife says that I'm the third kid.
Yeah, I love that. That's funny. How emasculating, right? Like I'm just like a gosh. No, yeah, that makes sense. Cool. Let me frame this up for you like this. I think that your messaging right now is too solution focused, right? I think that you need to practice that feeling of like stoking the emotion of a potential new group member. And the nice thing too is that you can use AI to do this. You mentioned that you use ChatGPT, you did the ChatGPT intake exercise. I would really focus on doing that. From what you said there, when you talk about problems, the things that stand out to me. By the way, I'm not a father, so like I don't know if I am an accurate representation of this market. This is just my gut instinct. But like, here are some things that I think. I think you're being a little bit too erudite in how you are communicating. I think that the fastest thing that you can do to improve your marketing is to run everything through a filter of an eighth grade reading level. I know that probably sounds like a horrible decision because like it's going to like ruin your brand and everything. But like, I think that you're a very articulate and present person. And I think that that's really cool. But I think that most of this country speaks at like, they read at like a very low reading level. And so trying to get more appeal towards your stuff is just reducing the barrier to entry with language, right? So I would really run everything through a filter of like, would an eighth grader understand this? The next thing is speaking directly to problems. I think I pulled out a few things, right? Feeling like there's chaos at home and you don't know what to do, right? Like feeling lost, right? Feeling emasculated, maybe, right? I think even more things around like when I was thinking about this before the call, I was thinking more like, hey, I have fights with my kids, right? Or like, I do not connect with my children. I do not know how to have a good conversation with my son, right? Now I'm touching on my relationship with my father. I love you, Dad. When you speak to these problems, I think there's a thing from one of my favorite books called Building a Story Brand, and they talk about the grunt test, right? If we're cavemen, how could we speak to the pain of our market in a grunt type of a way? So that's my question to you is if you were to speak to those pain points in the market from like a very rudimentary perspective from the gut, what would you say are the biggest problems with fathers today?
Okay. Before I start, I'll just say, by the way, in terms of being too erudite, too, heady, that is, as you might guess, feedback I've gotten more often than I'm, willing to share. And so, yes, it speaks to it. I've even joked about the fact that, well, maybe I'll just change my niche to only Mensa fathers, because like, I don't know. But at the same time, when I'm in person, I actually pride myself in being able to talk to anybody. And I have done that and
And let
borne
me
that.
let me clarify. Let me clarify. When we're face to face and over the phone, that is fantastic, right? Because like there's a lot more conveyed, right? There's a lot of tone. There's a higher throughput of communication. But specifically when it comes to writing marketing copy works really well when you're speaking to the lowest common denominator.
Yeah, no, I get that. And then the other piece is, and I think this is really poignant, is you mentioned the word lost. That is actually language that I wanted to use. It's been a resonant piece of imagery or whatever for a long time, especially because of the overarching brand and metaphor that I am using is if you're lost, find the inn, that kind of thing. I have heard from a number of the guys in my program they would not have connected with the word lost. In knowing me, they get what I'm saying and they're like, yeah, that's true, but I wouldn't have admitted that out loud.
Yeah.
And then so I was so if you said, are you a father who's feeling lost at home? They would not have like. So
Yep.
I think that's important to notice. And so I love this concept of the grunt test. Is that Donald Miller, by the way?
Yep.
Is that
Yep.
yeah, which is there's a whole other thing about that. But anyway, I do like the idea of the grunt test. And so I would say, like, how do I speak directly to the problems? Um, ultimately, I want to go back to feeling lost. But what I would say is they're tired of the arguing. They want peace in the valley. They want to feel like they're wanted and heard.
So hold on a
They,
second. So
they
hold on a second. We're speaking directly to the pain, right? They're tired of
okay.
the
Oh,
arguing. I am tired of the arguing. I'm going to be your market, right? Because even then, in your phrasing just now, you were being solution oriented, right? Before we get there, let's get to the pain, right? I
yeah, yeah,
argue all
yeah.
the time, and I'm sick of it. Right? What else? What other
Yes.
horrible things? When I'm in the nightmare, like what is it like? What problems do I have in the nightmare?
I say things and the kids just don't listen.
They don't listen to me. I love that. Okay,
Yeah.
what else?
Yeah. There's always too much to do, and we don't get enough time just to be together.
Yes. Okay. What else? Give me some more.
My back hurts, and I've heard this because a lot of men actually, embody it. They somaticize. So, my back and my shoulders are hurting. I'm holding so much and yet not feeling, I don't feel like I'm doing any of it right. I don't know how to turn off. I don't know how to turn off work. So when I get home, I'm distracted. Let's see. I don't know how I'd say this, but I can't put my phone down, and I'm so angry that the kids never put their phones down.
Yeah, I love
You
that.
know,
This is amazing, right? When you're like, instead of, so I think like, I talk about on the show, I talk a lot about breadcrumbs, right? The first breadcrumb, the one that I think that you might be struggling with in the messaging that I have read is this part, right? Of just like sitting in the pain, right? Sometimes I call this pee-pee pants syndrome, right? When people are just like they refuse to do anything, right? And they just have pee-pee pants syndrome. They're upset and they're sitting in the pain and they're not progress oriented yet. First, we need to just sit with them where they're at, right? And we need to label these problems. This is something that Sabri Subi talks a lot about in his videos where he talks about like copywriting. He has a book called Sell Like Crazy. That is where most of my copywriting advice comes from. And I think that if you focused more on that, if you reduce the barrier of entry with the language to just like eighth grade tops, and you started to just list these problems of all of those things that you just mentioned, which were all great, that I can barely remember. The phone one was great. The bringing work problems home was great. All of those were awesome. And by the way, you know these intuitively because you've done your shit and you know this, which is awesome. You're not like playing at this, which is something that I love. You're also super qualified and legit, which is awesome. So I'm super stoked to help you. So cool. So I would work with that stuff. That's the first thing. The next thing too is you have this group of men, right? You have this group of men, and I would try to utilize that to help you work on your marketing positioning, right? I would try to send them a survey of like, before focusing specifically on things that make those problems like bullet wound problems instead of vitamin problems, right? Before, think of the problems that you experienced before you joined this group, or, think of the problems that you currently experience at home. What problems do you experience at home, right? I think even just starting with something like that is really good. Speaking to the frustrations and anger points of that market is really good. That's the first thing I would do is send out a survey to your existing group and be like, just complain about the problems what gets you frustrated, right? Yeah. How do you feel about that idea?
I can do that later this afternoon, actually. That'll be great.
Beautiful. I think that'll get you started. Cool. So now we're speaking directly to the audience, directly to their pain points, and then we're going to kind of bring them on the journey. Pun intended, I guess. The next thing I think is building this engine, right? Because right now we're kind of the marketing strategy right now, and this is not to be condescending, but it just kind of seems like the reality is like we've got a bunch of pans out, we've got some referrals from mom groups, and we're just hoping that it rains. We're kind of
Oh, yeah.
hoping you know. And so instead of that, it's like what I really like is predictable systems, right? When we do one thing, then we can get an output every single time, stuff
Excellent.
within our control, right? Now the crappy part with that is that usually costs stuff, right? That usually costs time and or money, right? And I think that the easiest way to do it is to just pull the money lever and like try to like get a positive ROI with some advertising dollars. I think paid ads would be perfect for your business. I think especially a high touch point paid ads funnel for your business right now would be something that I would highly recommend because it would give you practice doing the sales side of this. I also think that you are fantastic on the phone and you are a clinical professional. So you're going to nail that, right? But like once you do it more and once you get practice at walking someone from never having met you before to being in the group, I think that's a good thing to practice. So have you ever heard of Facebook lead generation ads before?
I've heard of it as a concept.
Got it. What I would do, honestly, the biggest lever that I think that you've got right now is to run Facebook lead gen ads. The reason I'm recommending this is because it would let you do two things. It would let you first take those theories that I have, because by the way, I am not a guru that says, oh, do what I say and it's always correct. That is terrible advice all the time. Take what I say, use it as ideas and hypotheses, and then go and test it and see if I'm full of shit. So Facebook lead gen ads are great because you can write 5 headlines, right? And then you can write 5 post descriptions, and then you can write 5 calls to action or descriptions of the link or whatever. And it will automatically cycle and A/B test these things for you, closing one form, right? That form is very simple. They will, if you go and set these up, I probably should make my own tutorial on how to do this, but I think if you just Google how to run Facebook lead gen ads in 2025, you will find a 20-minute tutorial. I would highly recommend running that, and then spending like $200 on a campaign that lasts like 2 weeks or so, that generates leads between hours that you are available to potentially call those people. With that, I would try to call those people as quickly as possible. If you can call them same day, that usually is that's going to be your highest return, because if you call them like a week later, they're not going to, it's not going to work. So
Not as
yeah,
hot. Yeah.
yeah. So that's what I would say. And I would say, and here's how I would do your funnel is I would run those 5 headlines, 5 descriptions, and then I would get those leads coming in. There's an app on your phone called the Meta Ads Manager. You go into that, you go into the ad, you get your list of phone numbers, and you call them one by one as soon as they come in, right? At this point, I would run them through a quick script, right, of like something that you like. It's mostly listening on that call, right? It's not like sales. Once they have this ability to articulate their problems and things, they're going to want to learn more from you. You're going to position yourself on that call as someone who knows what you're doing, and that's going to make them want to learn more. What I would recommend is some low barrier of entry, like first thing to invite them to. Is that something that that was my next question is that something that you are open to? Is like, hey, first group meeting is free. Is that something that you have infrastructure to do? And is that something that you are capable of doing and open to?
Yes, I have been trying to figure out if I need to change some of the structure to make that happen, but I have in the past had, someone who was interested, and I asked the guy, because the small groups that we meet at the Mug Club, they can become fairly intimate. So I have asked the guys ahead of time, hey, I have someone who's interested in joining. How would you feel about opening the doors to them? And they've always said yes. I imagine I certainly could do that monthly, which wouldn't be capturing it when people are hot enough, but monthly do a community-wide presentation for all of the Mug Club. That would be an easy win. I could always add that if it's coming up soon. But I think the idea that we have the small group meetings every other week. So I imagine that I could always invite them into one of those to see for the day, to check it out for a day, for sure.
I think that's great. And by the way, like I still think like being critical of who you invite into that group, right? Like even the positioning of like, this is my opportunity to kind of evaluate you, right? Kind of like using it as a thing to like, I want to make sure that the people who are invited to my group I'm intentional about that, kind of like, keeping them a little
Yes.
bit at a distance. That's going to increase the perceived value of what you're doing. And they're going to kind of get a little FOMO of like, okay, cool. Like, there's a chance that I won't make it into this club, right? And so that's going
Hmm.
to increase the perceived value as well. Cool. Hearing that, what are your thoughts there around that? Is that something that you hold water in, or are you skeptical, resistant to certain parts of that idea?
I would say to, full transparency, I think the only thing I'm resistant, I'm not skeptical, but the only thing I'm resistant is the tech and the app on the phone and all of that. That tends to get overwhelming to me sometimes. But in terms of creating an ad, following up, all of that, it immediately, because I've spent too much time looking at ClickFunnels and some of those other things. I immediately think of like I have to create a lead gen PDF or thing like that. And I appreciate what you're saying, which is really the funnel is they see the ad, they put their information in, I call them.
Yep.
We have a session, I would call that, for me, and to your point about like a little FOMO or a little, I consider it like you have to apply, like it's an application funnel in
Yeah.
some ways, right? And so I that isn't it. Ultimately, like I mentioned earlier, creating the short little ebooks or things like that. Ultimately, I'd like to use them as well, but right now I haven't written them. So I don't really. Yeah, no, I don't have any hesitancy around doing it. It's just a matter of like back to my own. We talked first about like my erudite and like, oh shoot, I got to make five headlines. I got to make sure that those are good. And really the idea of creating those things might give me pause more than anything else.
Gotcha. There's a few
Yeah.
reasons why I'm specifically recommending this, because other people probably would say to do the lead magnet route, right? Do that ebook lead magnet route. That is not, by the way, I'm not saying that that's not something that you should be doing, right? I think even having that as, there are ways to set this up where you can set up some like Zapier integrations, or you could use Active Campaign to fulfill the lead magnet stuff. You're going to need some sort of like reason for the person to click the ad in the first place. And so one of those reasons could be, like, hey, get my free guide on this specific thing designed to solve this. Again, you're trying to solve that bullet wound problem, right? Back when I was building my marketing agency, my bullet wound problem was, I was trying to build a marketing agency for senior living communities, trying to improve their marketing, right? And so my problem was, optimize your Google My Business page so you can start getting calls that same day, right? Because most people sleep on this, and if you just make your thing a little bit better, you can literally get calls that same week. And I worked on that guide for a very long time until I handed it to somebody and they're like, holy shit, this worked. And I was like, yeah, because I know what I'm talking about. So lead magnets are fantastic, but I think your problem right now is like, I really like your business. You're at 10, you're trying to get to 60. If you close 5 a week, like you're going to get there. I
Yeah.
think the fastest way to do that is to just get people on the phone with you, because you're great on the phone. You are interesting to talk
Yeah.
to, and you will close them. So that's why I suggest that. The other beautiful thing is that everything's remote. Your potential market is the entire United States or Canada or even
Yeah.
broader.
So I have one guy from the UK right now.
Awesome. Yeah. So like, I mean, you can even
Yeah.
include those in your target market, right? Which is really nice, because if you were trying to do this on a local scale, which I kind of originally thought was what you're doing. By the way, that was something that I was going to tell you to clean up in your marketing, is like, make sure people understand that this is something that you can join from anywhere, right? Because I was like, oh, is he doing in person? He's doing in-person small groups in a church basement somewhere, like once a week. And it's like, nope, it's all on Zoom, which is super cool.
Yeah.
It allows you to open up your total addressable market, and your ad rates become a lot less expensive, right? And Facebook ads is perfect for you because you can target fathers, right? I would try to get you want to keep your ad size, your audience size down to like, I would say like 250,000 max, because if it's way too broad, then you're going to waste money, right? So you want to really try to shrink it to right around 250,000, or between 150 to 250,000 is what I would recommend. But that stuff changes because Facebook changes that algorithm all the time. So, but yeah, but it's nice because your total addressable market is so big that you can get those leads for maybe like $3 to $5 a lead, is what I would estimate. It also gives you a chance to test your copy, right? It's also going to say, hey, do you want to run an image or a video? In that image and video, you can literally record from your office and you can, be like, hey, my name's Jason. Write all the scripts with ChatGPT. I would recommend speaking first to those pain points and those problems, right? I was experiencing this pain at home, right? I noticed a lot of other fathers were experiencing these pain points too. Therefore, I devote my practice to this, and here is my solution. Very simple template type thing, but yeah. This will allow you to test multiple variables at once and start generating leads very, very quickly. Yeah, I don't know. Those are all my thoughts on Facebook ads. Sound good? The next portion of this, my last thing was about positioning yourself as a speaker and everything. But before we move off of this, do you have any questions, thoughts, comments, concerns?
Yes. And I don't know if this is a resistance or not, or how we'd categorize it, but Facebook ads all sounds great. One thing that I have intuitively thought for a long time, with some actual educated guessing involved. But the vast majority of guys who've gone through Journeyman have told me that they're actually not avid users of many social media.
Yep.
So that is a thing, right? I'm fairly active on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. I've gotten more than I can count. I mentioned earlier wives who were like, oh man, this would be great if my husband did that kind of thing. So as a result, one of the things that I have at least thought of, and I don't know if it's, again, intuitively, but my intuitiveness might be skewed because I'm not, this is not my training, so to speak, is I have never thought that this business was going to grow, explode, whatever, doing the sort of one at a time fishing on social media. I have always thought and believed that it would be through partnership ventures, referral sources, doing a speaking gig at a bigger thing where then it's essentially a good commercial or, those kind of things. But the idea of, to exaggerate even just a little bit, but like to do something that reaches 10,000 people, that only 1,000 people even click on, that only 10 people even, further on, that I get 3 people on the phone that, well, if I get them on the phone, I'll say 2 of them purchase. While that's great because it's 2 people, I need that. It feels like it's not the right fit for the way I would like to work because I am so much better personally. And it also, like I said, I've heard, I did this, I surveyed the guys because again, we keep going back to 10. Before I started the Mug Club, I had a different iteration where I was doing a 3-month course and I went through 7 cohorts of that. I've had, probably 45 guys over the course of the time. And so I've asked these guys, what do you do for social? What podcast do you listen to? What social media do you? And some guys are on Twitter, which I'm not going to use, but for the most part, guys are not offering up that they're often on a lot of these different social medias. Does that a skewed biased population because it happens to be who I have? I don't know, but I have joined in doing research. I've joined, 47 different dad groups on, on Facebook and blah, blah, blah. And, I know dads are out there. I guess that may be a resistance of mine is the 1-by-1 fishing option in social media and or the sort of joint venture, bigger referral, meeting with people, doing presentations, that kind of thing. I can do both. So it doesn't have to mean I can't, but that may be part of the resistance as well around Facebook ads.
Sure. Thank you very much. Let me speak to that really quick. So there are many, many people who have this resistance, right? Like my audience isn't on social media, my audience isn't on Meta. And my answer to that is always like, what hardcore evidence do you have to support that, right? Because from my perspective, that said, I come from a digital marketing background and my experience is in digital marketing. So, to somebody with a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? And I understand and I'm aware of that, right? That said, I really believe that, Facebook, I believe, is like one of the top 3 websites in the world, right? It was like Google and then Reddit, and then I believe it was Facebook. And it's been that way for like a decade, right? Facebook has I believe it's somewhere around 6 billion accounts that are active. And they also own Instagram, right? So through the Meta Ads Manager, you can get your ads on Facebook and Instagram. And so right there, you are targeting a huge segment of the population. From my understanding, I would be absolutely flabbergasted if like because your market is so huge. Like it really is. It's fathers in the United States. There are going to be fathers in the United States who use social media. There's going to be overlap. And so I personally have faith that that is true. And I think that the numbers do support that. That said, I understand that there is resistance. Right? Anytime people have these ideas, because I think that conventional wisdom around marketing 10 years ago was, this type of user is on this platform. This type of user is on this platform, right? Snapchat gears towards younger audiences and TikTok gears towards younger audiences. I think a lot of that has changed. And now, especially with Facebook's ad network is built with that in mind so that they can touch pretty much the entire population. I have not really met too many businesses that Facebook ads are not a decent solution for. But again, to somebody with a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So that's just my perspective. I would say this is try it and see, get 20 leads, give them all a call, try to do it within a day or two at the very latest. And if you don't get any nibbles, I would be shocked because, by the way, the way you do it is specific too, right? You want to do high intent leads, not like super high intent. I think there's like 3 options. They're like, do you want just anybody, or do you want some intent, or do you want super high intent? The super high intent ones are going to cost more money, right? I recommend the middle option, right? Which is like, make sure they're intentional.
Mm-hmm.
And then what you said too is the things about referral networks, the things about like other growth strategies. That's exactly spot on, right? Is like you can do both of these things in tandem, right? Where you can lay one brick at a time, but then also you can make yourself open to those like disproportionate black swan events where like, hey, this went viral. This interview got 100,000 views and I got, 30 new members from this, right? Those things are not mutually exclusive. That said, you only have limited energy. So I understand the resistance between building one brick at a time. But I think for your business, it makes sense to me to build that way because you're going to get better at marketing as you go through that experience. And then when those speaking opportunities and when those sales opportunities come up, you will be able to crush that every time because you've trained on the phone, right? Hey, come to my group. Hey, come to my group. That's my opinion. Fair?
Yeah, fair. I appreciate that. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great.
Beautiful. Cool. Last stuff is about positioning yourself as a speaker and as a podcast guest, because I think that you would be a fantastic podcast guest. And this is the like other hustle, right? So after you've got your website all locked in with brand new copy, again, you mentioned, Donald Miller, building a story brand. Yeah.
Story brand. Yeah.
Story brand's fantastic. Go through that framework. Really good. I like to combine it with Sabri Subi's stuff. I would also combine it with Alex Hormozi's value equation and the $100 million offers book. That value equation is really useful to copywriting, right? It's like dream outcome times perceived likelihood of success over time delay and the cost, right? That's how people subconsciously calculate value. Yeah.
Is that are that 2 books, or is that the book is the $100 million offer?
Yep. $100 million offers by Alex Hormozi is the book. And then one of the chapters is about the value equation. I think that's like one of the most useful things, especially pairing that with speaking to the pain points from Sabri Subi's framework is really helpful, I think. Showing them that you're like in the in group, right? I'm one of you, and this is how I solve these problems for people just like you, right? People like that. So cool.
It's funny you say that because for a long time I was playing with the hashtag one of the journeymen.
I love it.
So visually it looks like number 1 journeyman. And I'm like, no, I'm not the number one. I guess I am. But one of the things I love, just as a side note, one of the things I really love about this coaching as opposed to the therapy is that they know me. Like I am my whole person as a coach, and I am a father. They've heard about my teenagers. They've heard about, I can be more real and more present. And I think that for men particularly, that's a really important step for healing.
Yeah. I love that like connection, that like with that coach figure. I think that's awesome. My dad was a part of and is a part of a church, and he has like a very strong relationship with the pastor and everything. And I think that I can speak directly to that from firsthand experience. Like that really changed his life. You know, before he was involved with that church, he was a different person. So I totally hear that.
Yeah.
Cool. This last stuff about positioning yourself as a speaker and coach, and being a podcast guest. I think that this is a fantastic idea. I think that you need to kind of build a little bit of a funnel and kind of market yourself for this. The things that I would do for this, I would first put a page on your website that says that you are available for speaking gigs and that you are available for podcast guesting. It should give a little bit of an overview. You should lead with your clinical experience, in my opinion. Like that needs to be front and center on there. I have 30 years as a psychologist helping people. And then, you know, right now my goal is to, you know, build community and help fathers and men work on these things, you know, make that prominent there. And then I would even list a bunch of things that you feel confident speaking on. I am an expert in the following areas. List 10 things that you could talk to forever. And then, you know, and they should all kind of probably be within that like childhood development stuff, fatherhood stuff, anything that you could be an expert on in there. That is going to help you a ton. So I would start by putting that on your website. And you could even get your first and last name.com and just have that website be devoted to book me as a speaker, book me as a guest. That said, I don't want to give you a laundry list of things to do because it makes it less likely that you'll do any of them. So, you know, just starting with a simple landing page of like, this is why you should book me as a speaker and a guest. That's awesome. The next thing I would do is I would start with so you mentioned that you want to give in-person talks, right? Can you speak a little bit to that? About your goals around in-person talks?
Well, in person or virtual. I
Cool.
happen to love in person just because it's more personable. I can be more interactive and engaging, be more experiential with the crowd. I recently, well, not recently now, shoot, about a year and a half ago, you know, I did a ground rounds talk virtually to one of the biggest hospitals in Connecticut, and it went really well. And I've done workshops virtually of that. I would say the in-person ones are perhaps a preference just because I'd love to travel to places and talk to people. And also for what I just said is that I think it's more personable. That being said, you know, if I do more speaking gigs that happen to be paid and are good promotion online, then great. You know, I can, you know, continue to do it right from here.
Awesome.
Yeah.
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 Got it. Cool. Then, so you're talking about more like on stage speaking events to large organizations. I thought you kind of were more thinking like, oh, like I'm going to go around to local churches, Boy Scout groups, that sort of thing to like give a talk that night and kind of hand out some flyers. Is that so? That would not be on the table. You're more so keynote type
No, no,
stuff.
no. It's all of the above. All of the
Oh,
above. I
okay.
really, at this point, I like all of that. I've done more like one thing I'm developing and kind of thinking, we haven't mentioned this, but one of my specialties is cooking. I've had cooking businesses, I've been in restaurants. It is woven into the metaphor of a lot of the work, right? I'm an innkeeper. I get to nourish, you know, part of the work. I have a friend of mine who's like, you create nourished rebels. That's what you do. And I'm like, all right, you know, so
Cool.
that is so one of the things that I thought would be really neat would be to find whether it's churches or local groups or organizations or businesses and offer a cooking demonstration while I happen to be talking about men's issues, right? Like that is something that I could see would be really beautiful and I'd love to do that. And so I would say it's a yes and situation. I'd love to do smaller things with an organization that or a church that then they could ripple it. I could do it for parent organizations, for schools, like you know that. But I also, you know, I would love the opportunity. Maybe it's for my ego, maybe it's for just the practice that I think I'd really enjoy it. But I'd love to be in front of a 3,000, 10,000 stadium keynote, whatever,
Sure.
like, because I just think it would be fun. I think it'd be
Absolutely.
great.
I also, by the way, part of the reason why I really enjoy talking to like therapists, entrepreneurs, or like people who work with other people, like you acknowledge your own ego, which is so nice. Like other people are like, I don't have an ego. I'm so humble. And it's like, yeah, okay. I think that's really cool. But okay, so from
I think
a
it's important, sure.
it absolutely is, you know, and like a positive relationship with that of like, yeah, this is a business that like partially satisfies my ego, but also like, you know, a positive ego is a good thing. So I think that's great. From a practicality standpoint, I would do the cooking demonstration to me sounds like a logistical hellscape, right? Because like you're like,
Really good at logistical hellscapes, let's be honest.
okay, but I do think that like it's gonna If you're super passionate about that, make it happen, right? Because like that's the thing that's gonna solve any problem is dedication and passion around solving the problem. I think that's super cool. If it were me, and I would just start with getting my foot in the door and developing relationships with these communities, because once you do that, you only need a handful, right? And once you have some key contacts at each one of those places, then that opens the door to potentially like regular talks there. Hey, once a month I could do a different talk. So what I would start with is just spearhead point getting in the door to those organizations. So I would spearhead that with like the name of a single talk. I would prepare a single talk that you title very strategically, right? There are a few titling formats on the internet that you can go get from different digital marketing people who talk about how to title talks. But the one that I'm familiar with, I watched this one thing about webinars from a magician one time. I know that sounds like a crazy statement, but he had this like whole webinar course. And he was like a magician, and he was like, "This is how I do it." And I was like, "Oh, that's great." He was really cool. But it was like label the person, label their problem, and then like name the solution or something like that. Very simple framework. Or no, it was like the 7 key things that every, estate planning attorney needs to solve their marketing problem or something like that, right? I know those titles are kind of cheesy. Like they will those are created to be very consumable to like you want to title it almost like a BuzzFeed article. And I know that that sucks, especially to somebody who is really well educated, who's making a meaningful business. But like BuzzFeed articles are titled that way because people operate blind. We're all hypnotized all the time by social media, and we're walking around like just doing day-to-day life. And you need something that's so simple that you spear into their heads, right? And they're like, "Oh, cool. Okay, that actually sounds interesting, and I can retain what he's talking about." I would start with something like that. I would actually go ahead and prepare that talk with a slideshow or something. Then I would do a one pager, and I would advertise that on your landing page there, right? Of just like, if you want to book me as a speaker, here is this, talk that I give. It's called The 7 Habits, How to Break These 7 Bad Things That Every Dad Does. The top 7 mistakes of fatherhood. I don't know. You'd be better at this than me. Um, anyway,
I like it.
when you give talks, just general ideas about talks, Jason, what are some things that you would want to give talks about?
Increasing presence at home, elevating the mundane of the everyday, bringing meaning to your daily life, how to have conversations. And I just gave one I just gave one recently around, how to get your kids to actually talk with you and open up, how to be a person that people want to talk to. I've done whole other things. It's interesting because this is a little bit off brand, but it's still using the Journeyman curriculum on stress management and, how we manage basically, what's the mindset to walk through your life's journey? What's the best way to do that? The magic is in the muck. The yogic statement is no mud, no lotus, right? Like chop wood, carry water, those kind of things. How to make your everyday life meaningful.
Beautiful.
And, yeah, there's a lot more, but those are the ones that come up right
I think
off.
that's great. I think from my perspective, again, the perspective of a marketing person, I would try to point it at one of those bullet hole problems, right? The bullet hole problem of the one that really stood out to me from that list that you just gave was like, I have trouble connecting with my kids, right? You could find a way to say that in a very punchy way, right? The 7 things that stop parents from having meaningful conversation with their kids. That's a terrible title. Like the 7 things that stop kids from talking to their parents. That's actually kind of cool because it kind of puts the responsibility on the kids. You're kind of blaming the kids subtly in that one, where it's like, hey, when they actually hear the talk, they won't think that it'll be clear that it's not the kid's fault and that it's like the parent can change their behavior to get the kid to open up. Like, you kind of want to appeal to the ego of the listener of like, hey, it's not your fault. Do this instead. Sorry, I just listened to that book, Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents, and I'm like, this is a genius title because they blame the parents in the title. And so it's like, this is the perfect book. I don't know.
I love that. That's great.
Yeah. So whatever, that is just one psychological like appeal strategy for titling talks and stuff. So yeah, that said, this is also effort, right? I think that if you are basically building out this logically of like, okay, how does this happen? First somebody goes onto my website, then they book me to be a speaker, then I show up and speak, and then you have to have some sort of closing mechanism, right? So a closing mechanism might be at the end of that presentation, they can go to a link on your website and download one of those e-magnets that you're talking about, or they could just you could just take down phone numbers and emails and then call everybody afterwards and invite them one-on-one to that fathers group. Or you could advertise that at the end of your talk, right? But essentially trying to take these talks and use it to feed your other funnel would be useful as well.
Sure.
Cool. And that is kind of that. Once you've done those two things with the one pager and the talk creation and the website thing, then you can get podcast gigs by using different platforms for podcasting specifically. There's one called Podmatch. I have not looked into these, but I know that these exist. But the ones that ChatGPT spit out to me were Podmatch, Matchmaker FM, Guest.io. I'm also in a bunch of podcasting groups, and so I know that these Facebook groups exist a lot, and they're constantly looking for experts and stuff. So if you go in there, even with just a little bit of professionalism of hey, my name's Jason, here's what I'm an expert in, here's my landing page, they will book you like crazy, in my opinion. Cool. And yes, with that is the majority of my takeaways, Jason.
Love it. I will say with the podcast, I've been on probably 20 or
cool.
so, maybe more. And they are very much geared towards men's work, fatherhood, some mental health, that kind of thing. I think at this point, it's also, how do I reach a broader, bigger kind of audience? Because just as my work is niche, the podcasts I've been on have been very niche, and they're often podcasts run by other men's coaches. So it's not like the people who are listening are like, oh, I want to find somebody else. They're usually like, I want to get information to then use more to work with this guy. So I appreciate this. I'll look up some of those platforms. I'm on a few groups on Facebook as well of the podcast group, so I'll check them out. But all of this is great. I have a couple action steps that I can put into place, and I'm going to give this all. I appreciate it. A lot of it is resonant.
Wonderful. I do have one last recommendation, and this comes from my background doing legal marketing for 2 years. We talked a little bit on the phone about a webinar. I really think that an evergreen webinar on a platform like eWebinar would be perfect for your business. I really do. I think that as you build out your funnel for getting new leads in Facebook ads, magnets that you could try is a webinar. If you use eWebinar, there's a way to set it up so that it's evergreen, right? And it feels like it's live. I know that people don't like that because it's deceptive to deceive people into being is this actually live? And so that kind of stinks, but you can set it up to run every single day, right? It's you giving a slideshow presentation on your computer. There's a chat feature where the people will send you messages, and then you can get them as text messages to your phone, and you can respond to any messages or whatever that you have there. The whole eWebinar platform is really good, and I've used it in the past, and I've had really good results with that. I landed a few clients with that when I was building my marketing agency. So that is one last piece of advice that I would give to you to potentially try. Beautiful. Jason, what was the most impactful part of this conversation? The thing that you liked the most? The paradigm shift, if there was one?
Let's see. I think the big one was I'm now open to Facebook ads, which I don't think I had been in a long time. I've known about. I thought too much work, too much money, too much this, but I think the shift really is you mentioned you could put $200 into it and do it for 2 weeks, see what happens, right? I think that is, while in hindsight, I'm like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, but I had never really gone there. So I think that's a big one. And then the validation or highlighting of the sort of problem versus solution focused speaking, that wasn't revelatory because it's something I know about myself, but you presented it in a way that I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. I love the grunt test. I think I'm going to, make sure to use that a little bit. So I think all of that has been really useful. And the speaker of the podcast, this is helpful because it is all right, I'll do steps 1, 2, and 3, and then decide what's next, so having, people aren't going to hire me if they go to my website and it doesn't say anything about speaking. I might as well start by having something that says something about speaking on my website. One of my to-do lists that has been on for, way, way, way too long is hosting all of the podcasts I've already been on and having a media page on my website, because I've actually gotten a couple of guys who heard from me on different podcasts, and that's how they got in. So I should have those podcasts more available. So I think has reinvigorated that part of the to-do list. So I thank you for that. That's amazing.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Well, I'm glad to hear it. Thank you so much for coming on. Jason, how can people follow you, support you, and potentially join Journeyman if they want to?
Well, as people who are listening to this will know, I am redoing the website, but it is live. So the website is journeymenfoundation.com. And that was the easiest thing. I like to joke that a lot of people in business, when they're writing it, they talk about, we are doing this, we are doing this. Truth is, right now, I am doing this. So if you send me a message from my website, you will hear from me directly. I have not figured the tech out to automate. So literally, if you join or if you put your email in, you're going to get an email from me that I wrote to you. So for sure, at this point, you can go to the website. As I mentioned, I'm also active on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. I can share with you those links if you want to put them below. But just, if you searched my name, Jason S. Frischman, on any of those, I'm sure you'd find it.
Beautiful. Guys, thank you so much for watching Chasing Dragons. If you enjoyed this episode, let us know in the comments. If you have any other additional advice for Jason, we're building an entrepreneurship community here, right? So if you're like, hey, Noah, you missed this big thing, go ahead and post it in the comments, right? Jason, by the way, when you're looking through those comments, make sure you're doing that with a level of discernment of like, okay, who is this person? What are they actually telling me to do, right? Don't just take blind advice from strangers.
Oh, yes.
Cool. Guys, thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, leave a like. Let me know in the comments. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye. And thank you, Jason, for coming on. Guys, if you're into blah, 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 blah. Guys, if you want to see more conversations with more real entrepreneurs figuring stuff out in real time, go ahead and hit that like button. Also subscribe to the channel because we're trying to hit 2,500 subs by the end of the summer. So hit the subscribe button.